All right. And we are live. Are we? Are we not live? How are we doing, everybody? Do I sound okay? Let me know if I sound okay. Good evening from Missouri. Time to rock and roll. Yes, indeed, it is. We got a lot to talk about today. We're going to get into it for sure. Greetings from Moscow. I am not late. It is 2:01. I am perfectly on time. Hello from Oklahoma, guys. Let me know where you're at while we're waiting for everybody to get in here. Let me know. Let me know. Let me know. I'm gonna retweet my live stream real fast, and we will get into it. Where is it? Where's my live stream? Oh goodness! Why can't I see it? Oh, there it is. It's not showing as an actual video today for some reason. I don't know why. All right. Let's get into it. Here we go. Let's see. Where are we from? Greetings from Norway, New York, Sicily, Estonia. Let's see. Late, gay, and muted. That is true. Sup? What is up, verse? Denmark, Germany, Sweden, Serbia, Kiev, California, Spain. Hell, same brother, same. East Bay, Cali, nice. Phoenix, nice, guys. Serbia, Illinois, North Carolina, London. Holy God! All right. Well, welcome in everybody. If you did not see the title, today is going to be primarily focused around the small town of Kurakhove. That is the epicenter of the totality of the Russian offensive operations right now in the south, just north to Pokrovsk. So that's what we're going to be really focusing on today. And we got some other smaller updates to talk about. But really, the primary focus of all Russian offensive operations right now is in this southern direction. They're pushing very hard here. So, I've talked a lot about the Oskol River region. I've talked a lot about Chasiv Yar area, Seversk area, some of these other areas. But I really think that most of what you're going to see from here for the next couple of months is primarily going to be in the southern direction because it is just wide open now. They've really dismantled a lot of the defensive fortifications and stuff like that. But also not only the defensive fortifications, but there's no more cities in the south. So we have reports coming in of some activity in the Zaporozhye region that we're going to also discuss, and some other Ukrainian claims just to kind of put it all together for you so you can kind of see in which direction the Russians are probably planning on going. But yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into some of these updates, shall we? Over to the old map here. All right, here we go. Okay, everybody. I hope everybody is having a good day. I hope everybody is ready to be educated on some geography here. So a small Russian advance here. Actually, I already talked about this in the last one. I'm just waiting for this gap to close right here. As you can see, these are two separate oblasts, and I don't want to fill this one in. So no changes in the Oskol River region. Again, remember I talked about there are offensive operations going on in this area, but it is not the primary focus. Same goes for the Kurakhove region as well as the Sumy region. These are not primary focuses. Like, the Russians are not in a rush up here to push the Ukrainians out of this salient. They've made progress when they've decided to push. And now the pocket is very tight. The Ukrainians holding it are not benefiting from it at all. Why, from a Russian perspective, why sort of close this wound that is bleeding the Ukrainians, and it's bleeding them most heavily in the east, or at least where you're seeing a lot of the damage is in the east. So not in a rush to push out this area. This is also where the North Korean troops that the West has been talking so much about are supposed to be engaged. According to Ukrainian intelligence, Russian troops were supposed to enter combat on Thursday or Friday of last week. We still have yet to see any evidence at all of North Korean troops anywhere near Kursk. The only confident thing I've heard, even from Lloyd Austin and Blinken, is that North Korean troops were training in the east of the country. So no real updates there. I'm still of the position that we're not going to see North Korean troops in combat with the Ukrainians. I think that this is just another, they're just trying to really connect North Korea, Iran, China, Russia all together, make that the axis of evil, make it the boogeyman, give them an excuse to continue supporting Ukraine. The Ukrainian government is pushing it really hard. Now, is this to say that North Koreans are not going to, is that just to say that North Koreans, it's impossible for them to join the fight? Absolutely not. We could see North Korean troops, according to Russian law, according to the agreements they have with North Korea, we could see Russian troops engaged in the Kursk region, most probably, if they were to be engaged in any combat. But technically, these oblasts are also Russian territory, so the North Koreans could legally, according to Russian law, engage in hostilities in these regions against the Ukrainians as well. As you've seen from the propaganda side of this, it really doesn't make, and this is what I talked about, it really doesn't make any sense for Putin to change the equation, right? The only people who are going to benefit from North Korean troops, gaining experience with the Russian army is the North Korean military, perhaps, but at the cost of all of this propaganda, at the cost of potentially, upsetting the balance. The Russians are winning. Why change the variables of the equation? It makes no sense to me. So I'm still highly skeptical that this is happening. I'm not saying it's impossible. I will wait to see it. But honestly, from my personal viewpoint, unless Putin is looking at this as we're going to war or we are already in a war, why not let the North Koreans gain experience? That's not how Putin has operated throughout this entire conflict. I just don't see that change happening now. But, I don't have all of the intelligence, so I could definitely be wrong, and we could see North Korean troops fighting tomorrow. But I'm just not going to hold my breath for it because it makes almost no logical sense to me. Okay. And I've seen a lot of people making the critique that they're using this as an excuse, like Russia needs to get North Korean troops because they're losing so many men, or this, that, or the other. North Korean troops are not engaged. They have not been engaged yet. We would have seen probably some evidence, maybe, or there would have been instantly claims of this happening. All of this down here, all of this progress that's been happening, all of this from Ugledar all the way up, all of this from Pokrovsk and Avdiivka all the way back here, that was all Russian. So no, the Russians do not need North Korean troops in the slightest. 3,000 North Korean troops, 8,000 North Korean troops, 20,000 North Korean troops are not going to change the power balance at all in this conflict. The Ukrainians are going down like this in their manpower and capabilities. The Russians are going like this, right? It will accelerate that Russian climb, sure, but it makes really no sense. The Russians don't need it. I don't see it happening. So, all right, let's go ahead and get into some updates here. Now that we're about 8 minutes in, I'm just going to say, if you guys want to stay up to date with when I go live and follow me for more constant updates, you can do so by going to the link in this YouTube description and following me on Twitter and Telegram. Also, Patreon content is changing. I'm sort of done with the demonetized series. I think if there's a good one, a good like stretch, I might do another one, but they're just not fun for me anymore. So I'm changing that. I'm going to be doing interviews and bro chats on the Patreon. So if you want access to those, go follow me on the Patreon. It is free. And if you wish to support me there, thank you guys so much for doing so. All right, back to it. Thank you for that little advertisement there. All right. So we have a lot of movement, as you can see, and it's all directed around this new massive salient that's forming. So the Ukrainians just got out of the Ugledar salient, right? A little bit tinier. They have pulled out of the Hrinki-Kharkivka pocket right here, which was really the Vovocha line. This line right here, this line of defense, was not supposed to fall as quickly as it did. It is very, very unfortunate for the Ukrainians that this fell as fast as it did, because Kurakhove is not a frontline city. This was supposed to be a logistics hub, just like Chasiv Yar, was for Bakhmut. That's what Kurakhove was for Marinka, Horivka, Krasnohorivka, the Novelske pocket, the entire Vovocha line. This is supposed to hold for much, much longer than it has. And I think that the collapse of this pocket up here to the north was the absolute. It's really the tipping point for the AFU in the defense here. Since we saw Ugledar fall, but it took the Russians quite a bit of time, even after they got it surrounded. And then the push out was a little bit slow from Ugledar, slower than what I kind of had expected. And now it's accelerating to more of what I had expected it to accelerate to. But since this collapse up here happened, since Hrinki and Kharkivka have been captured, it seems that the Ukrainians now have a different game plan going forward. They're not holding everything as hard, as tightly as they were, and the defense of Kharkovka is going. Kurakhove. Oh my goodness, Kurakhove. There we go. Sorry, I've been saying these names over and over again, and they start to like mix and not make sense. So, the defense of Kurakhove is going to be very, very difficult because the Russians have already penetrated very deep behind the Vovocha line here, and have basically compromised this entire northern flank of Kurakhove. So when the Ukrainians are trying to bring in supply, it's going to be very costly for them. If you have Russian FPV operators over here, you have glide bombs coming in. This is no longer a logistics town. Now this is a frontline city. And they do have some pretty substantial fortifications here, for a fortified line that goes all the way through these trees. Through this tree line, kind of covers the whole town. It is very well protected, but the Russians are already at the doorstep, right? They are already also knocking on the back door over here. If the Russians are able to make it to Stary Turny, this area, Ukrainian logistics basically into Kharkov will be cut. There is also this problem coming from the south where the Russians are pushing up and threatening the only two logistics routes really into Kharkov, and that's right here in Constantinople and Andrivka. So the situation is very, very bad. And again, we talk about like pockets and salients. This is an extremely deep pocket, right, that you're looking at. 17 miles, some like 30-kilometer deep from the nearest real safe rear logistics line, because this is no longer safe here. This road, as you can see, leading into Kurakhove, is under extreme pressure from just this area. So getting down on this logistics line is already risky. I mean, you're losing vehicles, you're losing supply on this road. A more safe route is back over through these small stretches of town. But as you can see, this advance into Turdove here puts the intersection at great risk. Fortunately for the Ukrainians, they have some significant defensive fortifications here and here, and as well as a defensive fortification that runs all through these tree lines and is quite significant. So this is going to be sort of a tough nut to crack, or it should be for the Russians. As you know, Kurakhove is right here, so they're able to, even if supply is fully cut from these roads, they're still going to be able to supply it just through dirt fields and along tree lines here. So this sort of circle right here between this drainage pool, or like waste treatment or something, from this area down to the corner of this fortification outside of Turdove, is going to be a very tough nut for the Russians to crack. And there are a string of fortifications that actually run along this sort of connection. So what I think the Russian goal is here is to push up from Maximivka towards Suki Yali. I'm hoping that's right. And if they can get into this area and cut logistics into the remaining part of these settlements here, and really force this to become the active front line, the Ukrainians will have to step back into Kurakhove. So I think that's really the goal. Get up here, cut supply down through this line. If they can come up and try to cut this intersection. And if that happens, this entire pocket down here basically collapses. With this Russian progress out of Maximilianivka, the fortification down here in Ilinanka and Antonivka is also going to be compromised. I'm going to take us over and look at a topographical map because I actually made a post about it, and I'll show you that post here. I'll actually go over to it right now because there is a topographical map that I wanted to show you guys that I outlined the front line on. And you can really start to get a sense of what is going. Oops, that's just the topographical map. That's not what I meant to go to. Right here. Okay, so as you can see here, the Russians have full control over all of the high ground, or almost all of it. You can see that Pokrovsk up here is still on the high ground along that railroad. This is Orshitny right here. Here's Avdiivka. Here's the railroad that they followed. Here is Novohordivka. Here is Hordivka. Here is Ukrainsk. And here is Kurakhove that is still under Ukrainian control. The reason why I circled these three settlements is that these are the only three settlements in this entire region that have any development, any structure that Ukraine could possibly defend from. So you have Velika Novosoka down here, Kurakhove, and then Shevchenkov. Let me see. What is the name of that little town called? Shevchenko right here. So those are, you can really see how the Russians have control over the high ground to the east and the south. They have full control over all of the elevated territory. They've now pushed into this elevated territory right here. That's what I just was talking about, onto this high ground, and the entire south is now compromised, right? So according to this map, if you look at it, Kurakhove is the last major fortified and defensible position in the south before the Russians hit this entire open area. And remember, I talked about this sort of pear shape right here, or eye shape, this oval. This right here is going to be an area that the Russians are going to be very it's going to be very easy for them to push out and accelerate into this area because there's just no defense here. There's no real ability for the Ukrainians to stop the Russians. And if you look right here, and I will show you this on my map as well, this dividing line is in fact the dividing line for the let's see. So this is the oval that I was talking about. It runs in this little valley, in these little valleys right here. This area right here is going to be ripe for the taking for the Russians. It's going to put them behind Pokrovsk as well, which is going to be very dangerous for the Ukrainians. And it will bring them to the edge of the Donetsk Oblast, with Dnepropetrovsk being directly on the other side. And if you look at it in a couple of places here, the Russians are actually extremely close to that oblast. We're talking 17, 18 kilometers from most of the Russian frontline positions. So I think that this is going to be a really good test. I think we're going to see most of this right here fall by New Year's. I think that most of this is going to be captured up to Andriivka by New Year's. I think Kurakhove is going to fall around the end of November. just the way things have been going, that seems realistic. I think in 3 weeks, the Russians will be able to push down and cut off supply from the north here, as well as whatever developments come down here in the south could instantly jeopardize Kurakhove, right? If the Russians are able to advance through these fields and begin to put pressure on Andrivka and Konstantinopel, that is going to put extreme pressure on Kurakhove, and we could see Kurakhove just be withdrawn from. And I think that's what you are going to now see in general from the AFU. They don't have the manpower to commit to any sort of Bakhmut style or Avdiivka style defense. Those days are gone. We are never going to see those meat grinders again, right? The meat has, this is super cold, and I don't like talking like this, but the meat has already been ground, right? That's what the last 2 years of attrition warfare were. That is no longer the case. Now the Ukrainians can't defend like that. So the whole, the whole war is just going to shift. You're never going to see a 2023 AFU ever again. They're just going to get weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker from here on out. And this is just going to continue at this pace. And this is a insane pace that we're seeing. So just to go over the advances here, because I just sort of talked about them kind of in a overall sort of sense. The Russians have advanced here into Novo-Oleksivka, and this is very, very bad for the Ukrainians. This is that gap that I talked about right here. The Russians have already begun advancing out from Seladove. Remember, Seladove is intact, and it will now become a logistics hub for the Russians moving forward. There is also a confirmed advance here into Hihorivka, although I have left it in purple because there were reports that the Russians have entered Petrivka here, just following this rail line again. So I'm just going to leave this green. I imagine most of this field right here has been captured along with this section that I have purple. And so that will be another extension out from Seladove. And again, this is what we're talking about, right? You're not going to see a lot of progress right here from this line into Minhorod or Pokrovsk, because the Ukrainians have to hold this at all costs. If they don't hold this, there's no point in holding the south at all. All of this will just have been for naught. It makes you have to hold this. So don't expect much Russian movement here. Expect Russian movement here just to the south, and they will just continue moving north up here for Mezhova or something like that, to really establish themselves behind Pokrovsk, and then never have to slog through this urban jungle like they have multiple other times throughout the war. All right, moving down here, we have a further just the more or less the pocket is closing here. Remember, Hrinki and Hrihivka have both been captured. So this pocket now makes no sense for the Ukrainians to hold. There's no real defensive line here, and they will just slowly be pushed back to where the front is going to be leveled. There's literally no point in holding this other than to just try to delay the capture of Kurakhove for as long as possible, although that's not really going to last very long. Here was that advance that goes down onto the high ground that I was talking about. This is a critical situation now for the Ukrainians. What's going to end up happening here is you're just going to see all of these little towns just fall, and the Ukrainians are going to have to retreat back to the defensive line that I had sort of marked earlier. Here, let's see if I can bring it up. I had talked about it. So remember, I talked about this being the area where you can see basically from the high ground of Ugledar. It's almost completely captured now, and this is the result of losing these hills right here. So Ugledar was very vital. The Ukrainians have lost all of this now because of the loss of Ugledar, and you will have to see the Ukrainians likely retreating to some line that resembles this, as I had talked about a couple weeks ago, just because of this advance over here, as well as the advances to the north, compromising Kurakhove. So the key to the south right now, Ugledar has fallen. That was the first lock. This is the second lock, and then it's home free. There's just nothing back here. There's no massive defensive fortifications like this. There's no solid logistics lines. There are no logistics hubs, right? The closest town is Propasnaya over here, I guess, and that is what, 100 kilometers away, 70 kilometers away. So it's really not good. I love you too, man. Thank you so much. Sorry I missed your comment from earlier. I hadn't switched back over to this stream for a little bit. All right. I think that's all of the updates I have for today. Yeah, that's it. So if you guys wanted to ask me some questions, I have one article that I wanted to talk about, and then I'm kind of good. I was maybe going to mention the Moldovan elections. We can talk about that a little bit. Nothing has really changed in the Middle East from the last time we talked. And I'm just trying to think about anything else. I don't really know. If you guys have questions, though, go ahead and get them in. I'm going to go ahead and go over here and talk about this article. So this is just sort of the beginning of the excuses. That really the talk of Ukraine losing is now becoming a major focus. People like Bill Maher, just recently very publicly came out on his show and said that, the situation is really not looking good for Ukraine. His whole panel agreed with him. And they're sort of the usually more of the left crowd. So that was interesting to see that, it's really starting to seep into it being a topic of discussion that Ukraine is now losing. The imagination the imagination land that everybody was living in is starting to fade. Thank you, brother. And reality is starting to set in. So let me go ahead and read this for you guys. Ukrainian forces are restraining one of Russia's most powerful offensives since the start of Moscow's, what is it? A full-scale invasion on its smaller neighbor. Oh, just smaller little neighbor. I love the languaging. The language is manipulating the English language to invoke emotion. You can just, it's simple adjective changes and stuff like that. I think it's beautiful. It's one of my favorite parts of propaganda is the manipulation of a language to elicit emotions that are completely unfounded, just, because most people who are reading this are going to go, oh my God, a full scale invasion of its smaller neighbor. How could they ever do that? It's goofy. Like the US doesn't do that. But if the US does it, they're just going to say a coalition, intervention or something like that. It's very interesting to me. The top commander of Kiev's forces said on Saturday, Russian troops advanced in September at their fastest rate, so admitting that the Russians are now advancing faster than ever since March of 2022. The month after President Vladimir Putin ordered the invasion. I hate that. I hate how they do this, though. The armed forces of Ukraine are holding back one of the most powerful Russian offensives from launching I just read that. After failing to capture the capital of Kiev, again, coping. They failed to do what they never set out to do in the beginning. In the early war and win a decisive victory, Putin scaled back his war ambitions to taking the Donbass industrial heartland, scaled back his ambitions, but scaled up his military-industrial complex, scaled up the total number of military personnel in the Russian military, and has generally increased his ability to actually achieve objectives in Ukraine, but he has scaled back and he's somehow failing still. Guys, you're just going to hear this for the next decade about, it's just going to be cope and excuses about why things happened and for what reason. In Ukraine's east, which covers the Luhansk and Donetsk regions. Donbass has since become the war's main theater where some of the biggest battles in Europe for generations have been taking place and where thousands of troops of each side have died. Okay, so mostly what I'm just talking about here is again, just the language usage. and the preparation for the audience to understand that the Russians are now moving faster than ever. The Ukrainian army is weaker than ever, but somehow the Ukrainians are winning, the West is winning, Russia is losing and failing at what it's doing. You're just going to continue to see this, but it's going to become more and more revealing as time goes on. Nice job. You are our hero. Okay, well, don't let me be your hero. I'm just a guy on the internet talking. But thank you so much, and I'm glad you're in here watching me. Guys, I'm not anything special. I don't ever claim to be anything special. I just pay attention, and I pay attention more than you guys will ever be able to because I consider this my full-time job, right? So don't believe everything I say. Definitely double check and triple check everything because I can definitely be fallible and wrong, and I have been wrong in the past. So I try my best, though, and I appreciate all of you guys in here supporting me, especially you, Optimistic Future. All right, guys. Questions. Go ahead and ask some questions. I'm not seeing anything right now, but as soon as we get some, I'll start talking about them. One thing that the Ukrainians are now talking about, they're blowing the alarm bells early, and I had talked about this, is that the Russians are now building up a large troop concentration somewhere in this area and preparing for a possible offensive on Holyay-Polye, but I think that the goal will probably be Velika Novosilka and just really wrapping up this southern Donetsk push. From my perspective, what the Russians are going to do is the Russians are going to beat the Ukrainians really, 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 really bad in the east. They're going to put their foot on their throat and push out the regions that they have annexed, right? So it's going to be Zaporozhye, Donetsk, Luhansk. That's going to be the major focus of the Russian offensive right now. So they might push for Holyay-Polye because that is still in the Zaporozhye region. They still need to push all the way out up here, right? This is what they have claimed that they are going to do. And I really think that once the Russians get those 4 oblasts under control, I don't know if they're going to cross the river again. This might be sort of the demarcation line here is much more beneficial for the Russians, at least for right now. The Russians can walk away without getting Odessa and Nikolaev. A lot of people are going to be hurt about it. Who cares? If you can achieve a nominal victory without those 2 things, it's not the end of the world, right? The Transnistria issue is always there, whatever. It's always going to be there. It's not your primary concern, right? It's not like those troops are going to be executed or anything like that. It's not primary right now. So what I think is going to happen is that the Russians are going to push out their oblasts. And then once they reach that sort of stopping point, they're going to then come back to the Ukrainians with a worse deal than previous. And they're going to say, you get to take it or you don't get to take it, right? And this is not a negotiation. This is a offer. Here's your offer. This is the best it's going to get. If you refuse this, we're going to continue. If that is refused, which I imagine that it probably will be, depending on how long this takes, and I'm thinking summer of 2025, maybe ish time zone, or time in that time range. Once that happens, then you will maybe see a push for the rest of the territory on this side of the river. But I think the primary goal for the Russians is getting the sanctions off of them so their economy can start slowing down, cooling down, because it is running hot right now. It has to run hot. And NATO neutrality for Ukraine. Because the thing is that the Russians are never going to put themselves in a position where Ukraine is going to be able to build up their military after the peace is settled, right? And if they do, the Russians are just going to be able to reinvade, right? And it's going to just start again. So, if the Russians can achieve a lasting peace with those 4 oblasts, get Ukraine to become neutral. The odds are that within the next couple of years, the U.S.'s influence in Ukraine is going to die off very sharply because of this sort of perceived betrayal. We're already starting to see that from a lot of the Ukrainian group, or the Ukrainian information space, and the Russian sphere of influence is going to come in and dominate. So don't think about it in the sense of that the Russians are going to, forfeit anything because they're not getting Odessa or Kharkov or anything like that. Think about it like the Russians are setting themselves up so that they can have good international diplomatic relations. They will be able to mend the diplomatic relations with their closest neighbors, hopefully reopen the market, the energy market into Europe. I don't think the US will actually allow that to happen. We blew up Nord Stream kind of to separate it permanently. But Germany can't survive economically without Russia. And Russia would love to have Germany reestablish them as an economic trading partner. So, if you can get a smaller territorial deal, but reopen that, completely boost your economy to unseen levels pre-war, right, or post-Soviet collapse, and you just get such a beneficial deal. Odessa and Nikolaev are not important. Sorry, that's how that goes down in my mind. Yo Scott, bro chats already on Patreon. No, they're not already on Patreon. The next ones that are going to be recorded, so I've just set one up. Hopefully it happens sometime this next week. Everybody seems very busy right now, but those are going to be going up on Patreon, and I'm going to do one of those at least every week. And then the second part of your question, we trust Trump really washed hands of Biden's war. Plus Chechnya was the last I think that the Biden administration would like to wash their hands of this war right now, but they can't do that because of the reputation that they've invested. It would just be such a terrible look after the botched Afghanistan thing, especially with an election year happening. So they tried to maintain this for as long as you can. And I do think that Trump would like to just wipe his hands of it because it's not really his investment, right? He doesn't have his reputation invested in it. So why keep holding on to it? But yeah, thank you for your question. Let's see. Predictions on, I think you mean Velika Novoselka. And I just kind of talked about that the Russians are building up forces here. I think they're going to make a big push for Velika Novoselka and really just try to push out this entire southern Donetsk area and create a massive salient around Kurakhove and Andrivka. I expect that this is going to come the second the ground freezes. The second the ground is hard enough, you're going to see Russian activation for Velika Novoselka, potentially Holyai-Polye, potentially Orahiv, depending on what the Russian force concentration in this region really looks like. Do you think Russia will do another? Do you think Ukraine will do another Kursk operation in Russia? Probably not. I don't think that they have the force ability to do that anymore. I think that the failed Kursk incursion that you're currently seeing was all they had to give. They could try it again, but it's going to be weaker and less productive each and every time they do it. So no, that was really their. They gave it all they had. Snake Island still a thing? Yep, the Ukrainians try to land on it. The Russians bomb it every now and then, but nothing major happening on it. Would you classify the Battle of Donetsk as a meat grinder battle? No, not necessarily. I think that the Russians kind of got lucky with New York and Donetsk, to be honest. Same with Avdiivka. They had these long operations because this line didn't move for forever, so the Russians had a lot of these tunneling operations. They were clearing out like sewage tunnels and stuff like that. That's how they got in behind the defensive fortifications here in Avdiivka and really ripped the city open. Same thing happened in New York and Donetsk. The Russians got into a pipe like here somewhere and ended up in the center of Donetsk, or in the center of New York, and that kind of collapsed this whole section. And then this area started to have problems. I don't think the Russians really expected to get into this area as quickly as they did, because the flanks hadn't been brought up. This was completely untraditional for the Russians. The Ukrainians were just incredibly weak at the time, I believe, and this area has sort of stabilized because of how the Ukrainians have the high ground here for the most part, or had it, and so this was just I think this was just sort of a happenstance, and really this should not have happened, and this issue should not be going on. So no, I do not consider it a meat grinder. I don't think the Ukrainian casualties there are anything even close to what they are in some other areas of the front. So no, I would not consider that a meat grinder. That is just a heavy urban battle for both sides. Has Israel offered you money yet to make propaganda? They see to eventually do that to good channels. I guess no point in having principles if you can sell them at some stage. Like I've always said, I am for sale to the highest bidder. So come in, come one, come all. No, I think that I am too much of a liability. I am way too loud. I am way too vocal. I think it's why a lot of people keep their distance from me, because I will call anybody out. I'll call some of my closest like supporters, some other big accounts. I'll call them out if I think that they're wrong. And so, no, if Israel offered me money, the first thing I would do if somebody offered me money like that would be I would come on here and I'd go, so I just got an offer. Guess who just got a call is what I would say. That's the first thing I would do, because and if I ever got money from somebody to that wanted to sponsor me, first and foremost, my rules would be hold on, let me do this. First and foremost, my rules would be I'm going to be transparent about it. If I'm getting money from some group or some direction, my audience is going to know about it, which that is a non-starter for me. I think that every single like news organization should have a full printout of all of their donors and supporters, because then you would see how much of like CNN and MSNBC is owned by Google, basically, owned. They have a lot of say in what is promoted. It's why you don't see a lot of bad stories about Microsoft, is because Bill Gates dumps a bunch of money into different projects. What do they call it? It's anthro. No, not anthro. Philanthrop. It's like philanthropy and entrepreneurship, and you combine them. So you hide behind this veil of virtue that you're trying to save the planet, or you're trying to make people healthy, or whatever it is, and you're dumping all of this money into that stuff and then making money off of it on the back end. And that's really sort of what happens with news organizations. They get owned by big pharma, by big oil, by the military industrial complex, whatever it is, and they won't run specific stories, and their speech is sort of censored because of this money that's coming in, even though it's never openly stated. They just don't want to lose that money. So for me, if I ever get money from anybody, there will be a big announcement that, hey, we have a new sponsor, we have a new supporter, it is this group, and I do not let that affect my bias. So that's why I'm never going to get those calls, is because I will make demands that that organizations will not be able to uphold. I will tell everybody exactly how much money I'm getting, how much or what they have asked for me to do, what their background affiliation is. And yeah, so no, I'm just going to forever remain in this little tiny niche that I survive in with all of your support. So I thank you guys so much. No wonder you suck at it. I saw that Israel claimed to have inflicted more than 2,000 casualties on Hezbollah. You seem to believe Hezbollah claims of 1,000. Do you believe? Oh, so I just posted a thing where the Israelis were talking about their total casualties in southern Lebanon being 900 and some injured and 100 and some KIA, which is exactly 1,000 casualties. So kind of correct there, right, a little bit. I think that those numbers are being suppressed a little bit. The 2,000 casualties for Hezbollah, very possible. You got to remember that the Israeli military has much more artillery and aviation capabilities. So, yeah, I think command posts get hit. I think Hezbollah is going to take higher casualties to this conflict. But I think that Hezbollah is willing to take much higher casualties in the aims, to achieve their goals than the Israelis would ever be able to take. So counting casualties in a war like this doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's the same thing the U.S. did in Vietnam. Everybody says, oh, we won the Vietnam War because we killed, 1 million Vietnamese. It's like, yeah, but those numbers are exaggerated. The success of operations was determined by casualty numbers. So they were always inflated by troops, by NCOs, by COs, by everybody up the chain to make it look like the war was going better. So they secured their jobs. I don't think casualties is a good thing to go off of, and I've never really done it for the Ukrainian conflict. The only time I say focus on casualties is when you start to see the effects on the battlefield, like we're seeing in Ukraine, where they don't have the manpower to actually stabilize the situation. Then you can very confidently say Ukraine has taken a certain large number of casualties because of the issues that they are now facing, that they are openly talking about on the front. Entrepreneurial philanthropy. Yeah, that's sort of that's exactly what I was trying to say. A little bit. They've lost so many in Lebanon. They already won out. Yeah, no, and this is the thing: is the Israelis. What is the objective, right? To create some sort of buffer zone. That's completely failing. You're just walking into a hornet's nest. The smartest thing that the Israelis could do right now is pull out and just hold the border, right? And try to suppress Hezbollah firing positions, which they're not going to be able to do. But the idea that you're going to be able to invade with the population that Israel has, the military that Israel has, against an enemy who has been training for 20 years for this exact scenario, I mean, good luck, dude. Good luck. If you guys don't mind giving this video a thumbs up and a comment, it helps me greatly. And if you're not subscribed, please think about subscribing. Predictions for when the Zaporozhye offensive begins. I would say probably late November, right on the early December, basically. December 1st through anytime around Christmas, I would say you should expect some sort of movement to begin in the Zaporozhye region, unless things completely collapse in southern Donetsk, and then you might see those troops rotated over to exploit that area. I think that the Russians are now in the position where they know that this winter is going to be incredibly difficult. The Ukrainians are definitely weak. Depending on how the U.S. presidential election goes, we could see support completely drop off potentially. I think support's probably going to drop off anyway, but we're coming up against that sort of that breaking moment where the Russians are now at an incredibly strong position. They're now preparing for a much larger offensive against the Ukrainians, who are now incredibly weakened. Their positions are weakened, and it's hard to say where the Russians are going to go. I've always said Velika Novosilka Orhiv, but we may see that in the Donetsk region if the opportunity presents itself. It's just an unknown. question. Why talk like the Israel Hezbollah thing is a war and not just Israel being psycho trying to drag America and Iran into an actual war? Mostly because I'm kind of confused. It is a war, right? I mean, it is. The Israelis have done this twice in the past. They did this in the 80s and they did this in 2006. Probably more than that, but those are the big ones, right? So this is not a new thing. They have done this operation before. I would say that it's a war because you have two sides battling it out for territorial, reasons. They're fighting over territory. It is trying to drag the U.S. into an armed conflict, but that doesn't make it not a war. So, yeah. When you going to decorate the wall? It's just pale. Eventually I'll do it. I don't know. I hadn't even thought about it really until you just said it. I want to get a different background, one that has like a calibrated something on it or another. I just haven't done it yet. I saw a video where a Ukrainian colonel talked about how his opposing Russian commander and him both had grandfathers who stormed Berlin in 1945. That's tragic. This brutal. Yeah, that was part of the reason why the Russians did so good in certain areas in the early part of the war as well, is because, I mean, besides understanding the futility of fighting this war, which apparently most Ukrainian generals went along with it, a ridiculous thing to do. But the Russians walked into some areas and didn't have a lot of active combat because generals sort of just gave up, or they knew the other guys on the other side. That was a lot of what happened in the early days of the war. So yeah, it is very sad. That's the power of brainwashing, man. It'll make you do crazy things. How come Israel gets blamed, but deep down did started on October 8th? My guy, are you serious? The reason why they started it was because they were in support of the situation in Gaza, where Israel began bombing civilians, right? The whole thing was, you stop doing this, you stop committing what we perceive as a genocide, and we will create the conditions so that in the north, Israeli settlers can return. You can blame Hezbollah all you want, but Hezbollah has very, very good reasons to be at odds with the Israeli state. I don't know if you've paid attention to the last 40 years in the region, but Lebanon has had the rough end of the stick, to say the least, for a very, very long time. The only reason Hezbollah even exists is because of the IDF's incursions into southern Lebanon. So, I mean, you're ignoring it in a ton of context if you believe that all of the issues in the Middle East began on October 7th. That's a ridiculous statement to make. And I don't know about you, but I've been watching this conflict for a year now, and I've never one time seen Hezbollah actively until the assassination of the Secretary General. But during all of the operations to support the Gaza, to support the Palestinians in Gaza, the Hezbollah was not striking at civilian targets at all. It was all Israeli military targets, specifically, right? That is entirely what they were going after. And then that switched once the war sort of ripped open a little bit and became something different. But again, the response from the Israelis, both in Gaza and in southern Lebanon, have been extreme and over the top at a minimum, right? They are trying to drag the U.S. into a war with Iran. So what they're doing is what I would call it inhumane for the most part. I think something like 2,800 people have died in southern Lebanon, and something like 20,000 have been injured, which is already multiple times greater than the loss of life we saw during 2006. And the Israelis haven't even done anything in the southern part of the country like they did in 2006. They haven't achieved anything. So, yeah, I don't know. I blame both sides for both of what they do, but Israel is not blameless in this entire thing. Yeah, something like that. Multiple times, but I think two big ones in the 80s and then in 2006. Why do I not show posts of geolocations or advances for Ukraine? What do you mean? Well, I don't do really geolocations at all anymore because it was just kind of a waste of time for me. I find geolocations and I can provide geolocations for most of the advances that I have and everything, but I don't type them in because it's just a ton of time for each little advance. But what is this? Pretty sure that this is a Ukrainian advance into Russian territory that I have mapped. The Ukrainians just don't advance a lot. The only place, and I've talked about this multiple times, the only place I haven't updated the map that might be wrong for the Ukrainians is in Donetsk right here. But this is just all gray zone. So I'm just leaving the map the way it is because we don't have definitive lines. I have geolocations of Ukrainians here and Russians here and Ukrainians here and Russians here. So it's just like it's a whole mix of the area, and I don't have exact dates on what's happening. So I'm just not updating my map because I'm not confident about any of it. But I do. Any Ukrainian advance I will map. They're just not advancing anywhere. I wish I was paid by the Russian government, man, because then I wouldn't have to be so analytical and talks like about the negative aspects of everything. It'd be so much easier if I was just paid by somebody, because then I could just shill and just say non-truthful things because that's the narrative. No, unfortunately, I have to be critical of everything, including myself, and that doesn't pay as well. So it is what it is. I'd rather die than sit here and lie to you guys. It's so fucking stupid. What's with those videos of drones flying over Israel? IDF short of interceptors. No, drones are just a pain in the ass to deal with, guys. And yeah, they might be short on interceptors, but the way you got to think about it is the same for the Russians, right? These drones are not going to hit very sensitive targets most of the time, right? Even with the refineries we saw with the Ukrainian drone strikes on Russia, it never impacted the Russian economy in any way. It never did. And they've stopped now. They've slowed down because the Russians have just adapted and overcome. But the Israelis are dealing with a new issue. This is something that you're going to see with every military, until they come up with a means to actively deter the drone warfare. You're going to see drones flying over cities unmolested. The Ukrainians had to develop a series of sound devices so they could track Garand 2 drones. It would ping off of different audio devices around the country, different basically hot mics, and they could figure out where these drones were. That's how they did it in Ukraine. And then they also got mobile air defense crews, which were just basically, a team of 3 or 4 guys on with a 20 millimeter or a 30 millimeter cannon on the back of a truck, driving around, trying to shoot down these drones, which is actually kind of interesting. We've just got a report from one of the Ukrainian commentators, and he was talking about how those teams have now disappeared because they've all been sent to the front. So those air defense teams no longer exist in the rear, at least in any great number. And the Russian Garand 2 drone strikes have increased tremendously since this has happened. I just posted about it today on my Twitter. You guys can go take a look at that if you'd like. But yeah, so, it just takes time for one side to develop means to counter things like drones, which we've never really seen in this great number flying deep. And do you fire a missile at a drone that is not going to do as much damage as that interceptor missile is going to do if that interceptor missile hits a building or something like that, right? So it's a cost ratio that you have to look at, is shooting down this drone going to cost me more than the drone hitting whatever it's going for, is basically what you have to kind of deal with. Have you heard from he just did a report about 2 weeks ago, I think, but he comes and goes. If there's anything that happens to him, you're going to know very, 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 very quick if something happens to Patrick. Any more questions, guys? Go ahead and throw them up in. We're at an hour now, so usually this is where I wrap it up. But if you guys have any more questions, go ahead and get them in quick, and we will talk about some stuff. But not a ton to talk about today. I expect the map updates to start flowing in tomorrow a little bit more aggressively. One more question here. How does Russia take the north of Donetsk, Seversk, Konstantinivka, Kramatorsk, and Slavyansk? Seems like a tough nut to crack. Well, this is what we've been talking about, right? In the south, predominantly here. Once the south falls and the Russians are able to capture Pokrovsk, they will have a backdoor to that entire string of settlements, right? And the Russians will be able to push up from Pokrovsk in this direction, and the Ukrainians will really be fighting a war disconnected from Dnepro and Povrhod, right? That's sort of the goal. Once these are isolated to this area, Ukrainian logistics are all forced to come through Izum basically, and these back roads. It's going to make everything much tighter. It's going to make defense much more difficult. You're not going to have any stability down in here in the south. Really, kind of what this looks like right now. It's what I've seen down here in the south. The line used to be down here, right? Now the whole pocket has closed, and the entire situation in Donetsk looks different now, right? The front line is now way, way, way further north than it was around Ugledar, which makes this entire pocket much tighter. The same thing is going to happen when Velika Novosilka falls and Drivka falls, and then you're going to see the entire front is basically poised on Pokrovsk. Then Pokrovsk is going to fall, and you're going to see the entire front is going to be now poised to move towards Konstantinivka, towards Kramatorsk, towards finishing off, Donetsk if it's not finished off at this point. So it's sort of like just a line that's going to keep coming up and keep coming up, and eventually it's going to be here around Pokrovsk, and then eventually they're going to get up into Alexandrivka back here behind Kramatorsk and really start to threaten the salient. The other potential avenue is for the Russians to advance through Chasiv Yar and gain this entire high ground and then push down. That one is going to be more costly because the Ukrainians will be able to defend the urban areas. The final option is the same as the option down here in the south, except in the north, capturing Izum and then getting behind Slavyansk and Kramatorsk. Pokrovsk and Izum are the exact same. One is in the north and one is in the south. To crack this tough nut. But you got to remember, the Ukrainians are going to be so weak by that point that the fighting that we're talking about is not really going to play out in the same way. I told you you're not going to see another meat grinder. The Ukrainians just don't have the strength to do it. And once this fire in the south becomes a real blaze, the Ukrainians are going to have no ability to stabilize and no ability to keep this area defended. You are going to start to see massive chunks of Ukraine just be gobbled up if the Russians so choose to do that. Thank you for your question. Do you think every time you use the word "the whole front," you would deserve a slap? I don't know what that means. Do you think a civil war could start inside of Ukraine over power after? Definitely. I don't think it'll be a civil war in the same way that I think you're thinking about. I think it'll be more like a political battle that'll be very quick. It won't be this long drawn out conflict. It'll just be like a coup sort of thing. All right, guys. I think that's where I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for watching. This has been episode 112 of the Kalibrated live show. please go leave a comment, subscribe if you are not subscribed, and click that thumbs up. It is free. It takes you no time, and it helps me out greatly. Please go check out my Telegram, Twitter, and my Patreon. The Patreon upload will come as soon as we get that episode recorded. We were just talking about when we were going to do it today, so get over there. It is free to join my Patreon, and if you wish to support me there, guys, I appreciate all of the support. Thank you so much, and I will see you on the next one. Have a great rest of your Sunday. Do something for somebody else, and if I do not talk to you before the 5th and you are in the United States of America, go vote. Even if you don't think your vote matters, just go vote. Vote for yourself. Vote for a third party. Try to get somebody 5% of the vote so they get more funding. Go vote for somebody you think is going to end a war, potentially. Somebody who's going to start a war, potentially, if you have somebody in the military-industrial complex. I don't blame you for doing that either. All right, go vote. Go vote. Don't be dumb. You only get so many chances to actually do something that very few human beings and throughout all of human history have been able to do. Go vote. I will see you guys on the next one. Goodbye.